And so I have this small little formula, and this is really just like how to move yourself into a higher vibration. And so I call it the 3 Bs, and I'll mention them first and then go into them. And it's bail out, better thought, and then back to solve. So the first thing is when you're in a lower vibration, when you're in maybe the survival mode, is to simply, it's a funny word, like bail out, because it's like when you're in that, you're like, well, I can't just bail out of this. Like I'm stuck in this. There's so much momentum to this thought. But it's really just first having that initial moment with yourself to decide that, okay, this thought isn't helpful. And I'm ready to like, let me cut the cord here. So the first thing is bail out. And then the second part is to find any better thought. A lot of times I think what gets confused with manifestation is trying to find the better thought for the situation. So if you're like, I'm having such a bad day, let me go right into trying to find the better thought of how this is the best day ever. And that's just like, you're like, really, I can't do that. Like I have so much momentum here, right? And so it's not finding a better thought for the situation necessarily, but it's just any better thought. And that can be that my coffee just tastes so good this morning that I love my friends. Like I remember this one time we went on this trip and it was amazing. And, I love my kids, or just any thought that creates this vibration of satisfaction in you. A thing about manifestation is that when you do find this focus on one vibration, you create that momentum. So even if it seems small, that's actually going to start building. And so you find that better thought, and then all of a sudden the next better thought comes back, and it just keeps expanding. And then from there, from that vibrational standpoint, you can now go back to solve. A lot of times we find out that there was actually nothing to solve, and it was really just your own inner, problems coming up. So that's kind of my like simplest practice to start doing with yourself, is just bail out, better thought, and then back to solve.
Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. This is the podcast where we envision living our best lives by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Nicole Ningyuan, and I'm the podcast host. If you are returning, a very warm welcome back, EnvisionAir. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
Today, we have an incredibly exciting topic for you. We're going to be diving into the world of manifestation, which is a topic that has been buzzing over the internet for the last few years. I'm really excited because we're going to be joined by Morgan DeVries, who lives in California and has the podcast Move Like an Icon, where she taps into the power of listeners' iconic energy and uses it to help them create their biggest and fullest lives by working with their subconscious minds and intentionally manifest their dreams. And she also just launched her permanent jewelry line called Locked in Love, which is all about setting intentions and locking those intentions into the jewelry. How exciting. So today we're going to be exploring what manifestation is, how it works, and most importantly, how you can start manifesting your desires today. So let's get ready to start making our dreams a reality. Welcome, Morgan. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about all this.
I know. Well, okay. I honestly think that we should start by talking about what manifestation is, because I have seen it online like forever, and so many people talking about it. And I would love to know, like, is there a universal definition of manifestation, or is it just different interpretations?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's important for me to first say, I'm no manifestation expert, but I have been studying this within my own world for the last couple of years. So I think there's not really, from my perspective, there's not one definition, because I think people look at it from a lot of different angles. for me, I love to look at the bridge of spirituality and science. Like I love seeing how it connects. So when you're looking at manifestation from a very spiritual level, if you don't just, inherently have that very esoteric part of you, that might just be like such a turnoff because you're like, that doesn't make sense. I don't really understand. You're just believing something, So I really like to see how they connect. So my definition from all of what I have found would be really like the most general way is just like what's on the inside is being reflected on the outside. And so, yeah, I think that's like the most general way you can see it because of like what's going on the inside, what vibrations you are tapping into, everything is energy. So when you're tapping into that vibration, your external world is also going to resonate with that and then be reflected back to you. So there's a spiritual way to look at that and there's a scientific way to look at that. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be my basic definition, I think.
I love that. And I feel like, because I think oftentimes when I first got exposed to manifestation, it felt like it was a lot more about like mysticism, but like, and kind of the unknown. And for me, I almost found it a little bit scary when I first heard about it, like maybe 15 years ago, like when The Secret came out and everyone was talking about it. And I was like, oh, this sounds a little scary. But then I've actually kind of understood that there is such a, like you said, this link towards the psychology and even what happens at the physiology level, which is really interesting. So I like that you also focus on the science as well. And I've also, I guess, as I've also learned a little bit about it, I've realized that there is so much of, there is mysticism in there, but almost I like to think of it more like intuitive knowledge that we're just tapping into rather than simply like, I don't know, like random things we don't understand. I think intuitively we might understand it all. So yeah, I love that link.
Yeah, I feel like, I was going to just say, I feel like the intuitive part that used to be so mystical, like you're saying, but now we're actually seeing the science in that too. So even the most hard to grasp things are really being studied now. And like, we're like, oh, there really is there's something back in this.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to know, like you mentioned this idea of this link between manifestation and psychology or science. And is there anyone in this area of research that you've been following or you're really interested or has influenced your manifestation practice?
Oh, yes. I would say it's such an interesting, since I mentioned I'm big on the spiritual and the scientific side, like I can really resonate with both of those. I have kind of two icons for me for that. And that would be like the scientific way is Joe Dispenza, who you probably heard. Yes. Joe Dispenza really demystifies manifestation. And Abraham Hicks, which is the channeling of, or Esther Hicks channels Abraham Hicks. It's kind of a hard concept in itself, but what they talk about is, they really have the most general concept of manifestation as well, kind of more on the mystical side, but yeah. So those are my two, like, and I just put them together and it works. And Kathy Heller, she's another one. She's amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
So definitely.
And speaking of, okay, so let's go into maybe the Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, because for those that have never heard of her and I guess the entity, is it that?
Yes, the channel.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about who they are, because they've been around, like they have been around for decades, like 40 years plus, I guess, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I think I still have my own blocks of really understanding the idea of the channeling. The message is what it is for me. Like when I listen to their videos, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And they do take a very scientific approach too. It's hard to understand like where it's coming from. So that's my own block. That's my own thing. But they've been around forever. They have so many videos on YouTube. If you ever look up that name, you're going to find so many, but just like what,
like almost what, or like how, when you first discovered them, what was the message that really resonated about manifestation and our abilities as humans, if you will?
Yeah, I think that I was able to really understand the formula of manifestation because I think when I first found it, it felt very kind of all over the place too. It's like, oh, think good thoughts, bring things in, attract things. And it's just like, what is going on? Like, you have to be spiritual, you have to have the sound bowls, or that's kind of what I was picking up too when I first found it. And then I think finding the formula is really what they talk about. And I can go into that a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Please. Really what I found is that once you know what you're asking for, once you really get clear on what it is that you're putting out vibrationally, it's understanding that in itself is automatically manifesting that reality on an energetic level, on the 4D. And so that's already manifested. And then really what happens is now you're dealing with the blocks of it, which are like your subconscious thoughts and all of those limiting beliefs that you have. So I think what they helped me understand is really the paradigm, like the mental paradigm that you have of manifestation. It's not just like, because it's really hard when you look at it like, I'm just attracting, like you're trying to see yourself as this magnet. And while that is like a true version of understanding it, I think it was helpful for me to understand that it's immediate. It's immediate that these things manifest as soon as you are on this vibrational level, but manifest into your actual external reality.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think they helped me switch that paradigm up. And that was like a big shift for me, is to start seeing it that way instead. And it feels so much more like doable and less, it doesn't feel like only the spiritual people can do this. They have these magical powers. It's automatic. And now, okay, I have this autonomy now that I know that it's my subconscious patterns that are getting in the way of this. And that's when you go in. That's when all of the things that we do for it, with the meditation, with the sound bowls, with the therapy, is getting rid of or getting a hold of those subconscious beliefs. So that way we can allow it to come through.
Yeah.
I'm a very visual person. That's why I keep using my hands, because I'm literally seeing, like, I see this like line of like where I'm at and my manifestation. And it's like, it's a direct line. And then there's just these little slots in between, and we go in and fill those in. So that's why I keep using my hands with this.
I love that. And also, but I mean, it's funny you say the line, because I'm imagining it too. I'm very visual and I'm imagining that. Mm-hmm. But you said those things that you go in the line and but almost you said go in, but we're removing those limiting beliefs, right? We're taking them out. I love that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And the question I had when you were describing this was, well, how do we deal with that? And you then describing different modalities that people can use. So you said like sound bowls, meditation, like therapy, psychologist. And I guess the question I have is, when those modalities are put in place, what is the impact of it? Is it just simply removing, do you think, those sort of limiting beliefs that we have stored in the subconscious? Or does something happen to the energy itself that we're vibrating on?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that was something that I dealt with when I was first getting into manifestation. I was like, is it energy, or is it just, because I was also a psychology major in college. So I was very big on like, you're finally seeing it clearly. You're finally like working with your subconscious beliefs. So is it really this energetic thing? And so I went back and forth with that. And I think what I realized is that it's both. You are kind of it is just psychology, but it's also, when you work with your psychology, it's almost like that's the door to it. When you work with the subconscious beliefs, now you're opening the channel for the energy, is where I see the intersection of that.
Ooh, that's interesting. So the energy is always, or potentially always, vibrating high, but it starts going low because of all these limiting beliefs. But once you remove those, or that's when the energy goes back, maybe almost to the default of what was high energy. Like I have heard some people, maybe Joe Dispenza and Bob Proctor, and some of these thinkers, thought leaders in this area, and they talk about how a baby, when it's born, is just joy. It's pure joy and love. And it's not until it kind of starts experiencing life and some of the maybe negative experiences that it faces, and then all of a sudden it starts storing the subconscious limiting beliefs. So anyway, that's sort of the visual that I get when you were describing that. Like perhaps we are, and again, it's just us iterating together, ideating about what it actually could look like. But in my mind, it'd be nice to think that we're always actually, our default position is on high vibration, but it's just these limiting beliefs that are putting us into a lower vibration. But I do, on the vibration, what I want to know is, like, from your perspective, well, how do you define the difference between manifesting or manifestation and vibration? Because I think that I have learned recently that those are two separate things. They're almost two sides of the same coin. Would you agree? What is your view on that?
Maybe can I ask what you've heard? Because to me, I see a very strong connection with those.
Oh, you do?
I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I guess I see them like, so two sides of the same coin. So essentially, like, they are on the same, like, they're making up the coin. So they are one entity, but like you can't have one without the other. So they're still connected, but they're different in the sense that, so I appreciate that you're the expert more so than me, but I definitely, based on what I've read, for me, how I've defined it is manifestation is like the sort of practice of kind of putting in place, whereas the vibration is the energy that you are from where you are manifesting. So yes, I guess I see them two separately, but that's why I would love to hear what you think about that.
I think what I'm hearing is maybe like seeing it as like a verb of like the act of manifesting, because I mean, our whole world is vibrational. So everything's vibrational. And so everything is manifestation. That to me, those are the same thing. When you're manifesting, you're working with your vibrations. But I think the act of manifestation, I think maybe that is where it's different. And I think it's important to note that we're always manifesting. I think it gets confused of like, you're a good manifester, but it's like, we're always manifesting, but are you a good intentional manifester is really what's happening, because you might be good at manifesting negative things in your life, but you just aren't intentional about what you're manifesting. So I know that's kind of a tangent on that, but
but I like that. Like, I'd love to let's go into that a bit, because I think that is really fascinating. So how does one manifest negatively? Because we want to avoid that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's really a big key point, is making that connection that we're always manifesting. And so what are we manifesting unintentionally? And this is the way I like to see it, is that we're always asking for something. I mentioned this earlier, like, what are you asking for? And if you're not in a practice, if you're not in a meditation where you're consciously asking for, I want this beautiful house, I want this deep relationship, majority of the time you're not in that practice, but we're always asking for something. However, we're not always conscious of what we're asking for. It's usually the opposite. So if you're in a place of, if you're in traffic and you're like, oh, I hate that this car is going so slow, the law of polarity is showing us that you're actually asking for them to go faster. There's always this like opposite. So for example, like for me, I've been in a space before where I really desired a relationship, a deep relationship. And so as soon as I had that desire, even though I was in kind of this longing vibration, this place, there is a part of me that knows what I'm actually asking for. My soul knows that I'm asking for this really deep love. So that is a potential for me. However, what gets in the way of that is all of these beliefs that I have now of, well, it keeps on not working out. Well, there's nobody in my area. Well, it always goes bad anyways. So I've created this energetic potential, but I'm the one that's getting in the way of it. So that's how we're unintentionally manifesting.
Oh, I see. Oh, yes. Wow. Okay. So I think I understand. So, okay, if I can summarize, because I think this is really interesting, it's just to make sure I understand this. So you're saying that your truest, highest self, once you tap into whatever desire it is, for example, the deep love, your truest, highest self vibrates in that space and recognizes that is good and pure and happy and everything nice. So then all of a sudden you could manifest it like quickly, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
However, what happens is because of past experiences or traumas or things that haven't healed, those all of a sudden start coming up in your head, like, all the limiting beliefs of you're, not worthy, it's not deserving, it's not possible, scarcity mindset also.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden you're like, and then these start blocking it so that you can't actually, your highest truest self can't manifest. Is that, even though it is in like the vibration mode, it could happen so quickly. Is that right?
Yes. Definitely. I think you put that beautifully.
Well, no, you did. And so I guess the question I have is, how can we always ensure that the limiting beliefs, is it simply like what you talked about, just working on ourselves on a daily basis, modalities, whether that's meditation, constantly working on ourselves and using different things to heal the different traumas that we have? Is that the best way to intentionally manifest?
So I would say I have a couple of different ways to look at this, because yes, those are very helpful, but there's also a point where, you can overdo it, of really trying to just become this really great manifestor. You're always working on yourself. And I'll go back a little bit. The whole reason I even found myself in this space of manifestation was because I needed a lifestyle change. I dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression at that time of my life. And weirdly, manifestation is what kind of gave me that framework to be like, oh, wait, I have autonomy over my life. Oh, I can kind of work with myself on this. So I got into that to really change my lifestyle. And so I didn't get into manifestation to always be meditating and always be doing these things. It was really, I wanted to change my life. And so I love the things that I do now. I love meditating and I love doing the practices, but really it's what it's allowed me to do. And I think tapping into more of, when you really understand the core parts of manifestation, you start to recognize that when you spend your time having fun, when you spend your time feeling good and making sure that that's what's the priority for the day, then you manifest. Because when you're in this space, you're now in this open channel and you're able to manifest things anyways, and you start to become productive anyways. You don't have to be in this hustle mode. You don't have to be anxious to make things happen. So I think it was really, once I realized that, then my main practices isn't the modalities of, all of the meditation and all that, even though I have a meditation program, but it's important. But my main thing every day is how can I feel good? And how can I have fun right now? Because I know that's what's going to put me in the vibration that I really want to be in. Right. And so, and I think that does come a little bit easier for me now. I do have that as more of my dominant energy because I did do some of those practices, and meditation will allow you to find that clear space. So that way you can tap into fun. So that way you can feel good. So I think both of them, I would suggest, just having, it is kind of a dance that you have to do of okay, I'm working on myself, but I don't want that to now become my identity. And I want to prioritize fun, but how can I make sure I can actually access this fun? So it really is kind of having that balance there.
Yeah, I love that. And then, okay, but what if we have some listeners? Because I do know we have some listeners who, work in jobs that they may not fully feel alive in and or joyous, but it pays well, so they're in it. But sometimes, or maybe sometimes we have people who are just listening who just are in toxic work relationships. And because work, especially if you're employed, is so it's such a big part of one's life, especially if you have to go into the office, and let's say they have toxic work environment, whatever that is, toxic clients, toxic colleagues, whatever, or the environment itself is very toxic. What would you advise them in that situation if that's their day to day and they can't just quit their job?
Mm-hmm. So I think what I've found is that because I will say, I don't resonate too much with that lifestyle, so for me to just give advice on how-tos, I don't think that would be correct. However, I think what I found is that when you tap into this, you start to activate the part of you that does become the problem solver, does start to have those downloads and have those ideas. So I think when you find this space to be receptive, you're the one that's going to all of a sudden be like, oh, you know what, maybe I can tell this person this thing. And then that all of a sudden creates this ripple effect. And so, yeah, I feel like individually or like personally, I don't have like the right advice for that, but really you start to become really powerful and really intuitive when you start to practice these things as well.
And you're talking about practicing some of the modalities that you mentioned.
Just being an intentional manifester really is what I meant. Like just really recognizing where is my vibration right now? Where is my focus?
Yeah.
And that's a big thing too, is to like, when it says like, where is your vibration? That really means where is your focus at? And so when you get good at kind of stepping back and recognizing, oh, I'm having this thought right now, and I'm having this thought over and over and over again, and my focus is there, my momentum is building right there. Yeah. That's where my vibration is. So that's kind of maybe that first step, is constantly asking yourself, where is my focus? What am I thinking about?
That's so interesting. Okay. So what would you say to people who are, well, I guess it's hard. Okay. So for example, I'll give you an example. Okay. I went to the gym. I had this, like, I was on such a good vibe. I thought I was going to vibration. And I came out of my gym class, and this happened this past week. And there was this person who was parked so close to my car. I think he hit my car. Okay. And he was, and he was in his car. Okay. He was and it was like in my parking, like it was so obviously like inappropriate. Right. And so I was like, this is weird. And so okay, I might have gotten like obviously annoyed. And so I was obviously very, I was like, what is happening? And I went over and like, I was like, hi, like I didn't touch it. I just was like, hi. I was like, you parked really close, and he came up and he was like super ultra, like aggressive, like no, and like so intense. So in that situation, like it was I didn't appreciate that interaction. Right. And I came home and I thought to myself, like, what have I been thinking about or doing to attract that situation? Now, okay, listen to this. I did have a little bit of, well, okay, what do you think? What do you think from that? And then I'll tell you what I think is, and it's very funny. Yeah, but I want to hear what you think about that. Like if someone has those sorts of situations, which are uncharacteristic, like I'm not a super like confrontational person. I'm not like ultra aggressive. I don't have a lot of that in my life. What happens when you have these weird sort of things like happen in your life?
Yeah.
Obviously,
like how did you manifest that?
Yeah, like obviously yes. Okay, so I have, but then I'm going to tell you, I want to know what you think, and then I'll tell you what I think happened.
Yeah, I think those kind of things are very interesting. I think that we don't have a full grasp on what the way things are going to manifest, or the plan that the universe has for that to come about. And so it's not necessarily that see, and this is the part that I feel like we're still trying to figure out, of the really where is the connection. So
yeah,
the way I like to look at it is when I'm in these situations, it's like, okay, this was actually still part of the path to that other thing that I'm manifesting. And so when you're in those situations, yes, that might have been manifested into your moment, but how you react can still be different. So that I think, so it was maybe an aggravating moment, but the moment itself was kind of neutral. And then whatever subconscious beliefs you were dealing with right then could have affected how it went about. But the actual moment, the way I like to see it is like, that's okay. That was maybe the test to see if I'm now a vibrational match still to what I'm actually pulling.
Right. In. Yeah. 100%.
And another example just comes up with that is like with dating, once you are intentional about like, I'm manifesting this wonderful person, and then all of a sudden it feels like all these terrible people come around. I don't feel like it's this, oh, you know, the universe is just, you've manifested the wrong thing. I think those are moments to decide I'm still a vibrational match for the beautiful relationship. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Like almost like not tests, but like the universe maybe.
Yeah. I hate that word, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, yeah, that's, yeah. Cause I think we always, I was telling a friend actually today, like my view is that, and I don't know if you heard this quote before, but we're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that's so true. And I feel like we're here for our soul's growth. And sometimes things that are maybe negative or challenging, they're there to help us grow. And if you actually look at the patterns, sometimes for me, at least I've noticed that there are certain things that reappear it's just so funny and weird, but like certain, and you can see the link. And then all of a sudden, when you finally do the right thing which you know the right thing, I'm just saying like when you know what you do to handle that vibrates correctly or aligns with, you know, yourself, I think that's when you move on to the next, you know, like you move on, you say, okay, yay, tick, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And just to go back to that, you know, weird experience in the car parking lot. I realized, so I was talking to my girlfriends and I was like, you have no idea. I was like, it was literally like one of those TikTok videos that I watch where like someone is so aggressive and the person's recording them. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is what I've been watching, like hours of these aggressive experiences, you know, like that show up on my feed and I'm like feeding into it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to stop watching this sort of stuff, this sort of, you know, because literally that is exactly what happened. Like if I had pulled out my phone and recorded, I could have uploaded it to TikTok. It was so weird. That person was so funny. I mean, like just wild, you know? Anyway, so okay, we digress.
Yeah. Well, I love this type of conversation too, because like I love this question because it's kind of, it's just a tricky one, you know, and you kind of can look at both ways. And that's kind of goes back to what I was talking about of just, you know, the bridge of everything of like, where is it really landing? Is it psychology? Is it energetics? And it really is like kind of the mix of both. So I feel like this question kind of allows that conversation to happen of, oh, maybe it's both happening.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. So before we wrap up, if someone's listening and they're like really interested in starting to manifest intentionally, do you have like some steps that they can start taking on a regular basis, assuming they have really not done anything in this world? They're just kind of living their day-to-day life and they're like, oh, I've learned something new about manifestation. Can you give a little bit of like some practices that they can start incorporating on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I would say, again, the biggest thing is really, if everything's vibration and our vibration is based on where our focus is, then really getting good at understanding your focus and being able to manipulate that is the best place to start. And so I have this small little formula. I love little formulas, obviously.
Yeah, I love it.
That kind of helps move you through this. And this is really just like how to move yourself into a higher vibration. And so I call it the 3 Bs, and I'll mention them first and then go into them. And it's bail out, better thought, and then back to solve. So the first thing is when you're in a lower vibration, when you're in maybe the survival mode, is to simply, it's a funny word, like bail out, because it's like when you're in that, you're like, well, I can't just bail out of this. Like I'm stuck in this. There's so much momentum to this thought. But it's really just first having that initial moment with yourself to decide that, okay, this thought isn't helpful. And I'm ready to like, let me cut the cord here. So the first thing is bail out. And for me, I like to actually make a physical thing happen. So I'll like literally like throw my hands up and be like, okay, I'm noticing this thought, bail out. That's the first thing. And the reason we bail out is because it's not a productive space to be in. A lot of times we like to convince ourselves that when we're in this survival mode, that this is the best place to figure out how to solve my problem. Like we're so zoned in that we can figure everything out. But what history probably shows you is that that's really not true. We do our best work from a calmer nervous system. And so the first thing is to decide, I'm going to bail out of this thought. And then the second part is to find any better thought. A lot of times, I think what gets confused with manifestation is trying to find the better thought for the situation. So if you're like, I'm having such a bad day, let me go right into trying to find the better thought of how this is the best day ever. And that's just like, you're like, really, I can't do that. Like, I have so much momentum here, right? And so it's not finding a better thought for the situation necessarily, but it's just any better thought. And that can be that my coffee just tastes so good this morning, that I love my friends. Like, I remember this one time we went on this trip and it was amazing. And, I love my kids, or just any thought that creates this vibration of satisfaction in you. And a thing about manifestation is that when you do find this focus on one vibration, you create that momentum. So even if it seems small, that's actually going to start building. And so you find that better thought, and then all of a sudden the next better thought comes back, and it just keeps expanding. And then from there, from that vibrational standpoint, you can now go back to solve. And a lot of times we find out that there was actually nothing to solve, and it was really just your own inner, problems coming up. So that's kind of my simplest practice to start doing with yourself, is just bail out, better thought, and then back to solve. Because then all of a sudden you'll start to see all of the ways you can figure it out, and all of these downloads will start coming in. And
I love that. I know. I like the 3 B's. So good. And so easy to remember. Yeah. Love that. All right. Well, I think that this has been such a fruitful conversation, and I've learned so much. Before we wrap up as well, I wanted to ask, do you have any recommended sort of resources for people to learn more about manifestation? I know you mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza. Is there anything else, or anyone else that and Abraham Hicks?
Yes. Yeah. I would definitely say, check those 2 out. Manifestation Babe is, I forget her, Catherine Zankina, Manifestation Babe. She has wonderful resources. And even though I was, saying going back and forth with the meditation thing, but that's a really big thing. I think I can back meditation and the way I do meditation as well. So I also have that program available too, if people want to check that out as well.
And is that a guided meditation, or what's your meditation style?
Yes. So my style, because when I first got into meditation, I was like, I can't just sit here. I can't just stop thinking. Like, I didn't understand it. I was like, how are people doing this? And so the way I take it is really guiding you through kind of the steps of manifestation, of really finding the present moment, getting in this space where you're not being bombarded by all your subconscious thoughts. And then from there, finding what it is that you do want to manifest, having that intentional moment to decide, and then really working with your emotions to start pulling that in, because that's really the chemical reaction that's happening to pull it into you. So through I have a whole library of different types of angles to it, but they all take that route.
Guided meditation. Yes. Love it. I know. I also love guided meditation as well. So, well, thank you so much, Morgan, for being on the podcast and sharing your wisdom and all of your experiences with manifestation. I think it was really interesting, and I really appreciate your time. Do you want to tell the listeners how they can find you? What's the best way? Is it Instagram, your website? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, the best way would definitely be on my Instagram, which is Mo_mind and spirit. And then from there, I have a link in my bio that will bring you to all of my little freebies, or to my meditation membership as well. I have this thing that I do, weekly love notes from the universe too, which are just little notes channeled from me of what I feel, what you need to hear in that moment. So that's also available.
Beautiful.
But yeah, definitely Instagram.
Oh, amazing.
I'm on TikTok too, but I barely post on there. So
Well, I definitely will put everything in the show notes so everyone can find you. And thank you again, for being on the podcast. We're sending you so much love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.